We've been listening to Texas State Senate hearing on the police response to the Uvalde mass shooting. The director of the state's Department of Public Safety placed the blame squarely on the school district's police chief in terms of the response, saying he was the only thing that stopped officers from entering the classrooms where the shooter was located. Let's listen.
1 hour, 14 minutes and 8 seconds. That's how long the children waited and the teachers waited in rooms 111 to be rescued. And while they waited, the on-scene commander waited for a radio and rifles. Then he waited for shields. Then he waited for SWAT. Lastly, he waited for a key that was never needed.
All right, for more on this, let's bring in senior investigative reporter Aaron Katersky and former NYPD chief of detectives and ABC News contributor Robert Boyce. Aaron, I want to start with you. The director walked us through the latest timeline of events here in great detail, including a conversation between the district police chief, Pete Arredondo, and a dispatcher. Why was that so significant?
Well, it's part of what the colonel called the abject failure of the law enforcement response in Uvalde 28 days ago, because the chief, without his radio, was relying on information from others that may or may not have been getting to him properly and in real time. We learned that radios may not have even worked inside the school, so he may not have had a full understanding of what was going on. But the conversation was significant because it showed or established that Arredondo believed that he was the one calling the shots. He was the commander. And you heard Colonel McGraw say that the decisions made by the on-scene commander were, in fact, terrible, to use his word, and part of what left kids in the lurch with the shooters still in the classroom and actively shooting. And Colonel McGraw said there was no doubt that this was never anything but an active shooter. Arredondo's belief that this was a barricaded situation or that the subject was contained simply wasn't true.
Now, Robert, Arredondo had said that he was delayed, that the police were delayed in entering the classrooms because of the inability to find the right key to open the classroom door. What do you make of that after hearing the director's version of events today?
Well, it's just, as he said, an abject failure. All these things, physical security of the building. Who ran this? Who checked this? That's kind of his job, Mr. McGraw, who's saying this to you. Who overall, the Sims management in that state, this was a total abject failure. Exactly what he said. Arredondo failed. He also made statements, Arredondo, that he didn't even know he was incident commander. So that's the type of leadership failure they had. But the training, the physical security of the school, the communications, all these things. But the common thing is, I think that McGraw said, the protocol failure of pulling back and establishing a perimeter was in conflict with the protocol to seek out and end the threat immediately. And that's where he lies in right up the bat. I think that's where Arredondo's major mistake was. He never should have been in charge there.
Aaron, it's been 4 weeks now since this shooting, and today's account of what happened, the director answering questions, it still all sounds a bit disjointed at times. Why?
There's never been an official report of what happened. There's never even been a confirmed victims list that's been put out by any agency. And all of the agencies, when we've asked a number of questions, have all deferred to the district attorney's office, which is conducting the ongoing investigation. But this presentation certainly belies the idea that police can't answer questions. They have an awful lot of information. Arredondo himself is hiding behind the veil of a non-public hearing on the other side of the very building before the Texas House. That's going on right now as Colonel McGraw is answering lawmakers' questions about what happened and detailing what he called the abject failure of the police response in Uvalde. It should be noted that when other hearings have been held in Uvalde, families of victims were kicked out of City Hall. The fire marshal says that some of the witnesses felt intimidated by the presence of the very families whose lives were affected by the 19 children and 2 teachers killed 28 days ago.
Now, Robert, the director also talked about missed warning signs, pointing to, for example, posts that the shooter made on social media, allegations of animal abuse, talking about how despite people coming out after the fact and pointing these things out, nobody issued any formal report to law enforcement or to the school. So communication failures there. And then, of course, we heard about things like the radios that police were carrying, not working in the school on that day. Arredondo didn't have a radio on him, etc. How much of this boils down to communication failures, both on the micro level and sort of on a larger, more general scale? And what do you do about that?
These are correctable issues, but you have to get out immediately and do a physical check of the building. You can put repeaters in the building where you can make interoperability of radios effective. That wasn't done. The fact that when you have shelter in place and you can't lock your own door in a school, and I think I heard that, what he said, I couldn't believe what I heard. So these are failures. That's on Arredondo if he was the security chief at that point. This should have been done. The transfer of responsibility to the Uvalde police chief should have happened much earlier than it did. But let's go back to some of the things that the shooter did. 8 months before this shooting, he had started planning it out, was acquiring high cap magazines for his gun that he didn't even have yet. And then when he became 18, he bought the gun. And then he started on his pathway. So that pathway started 8 months before. Social media statements should have been red flagged all over the place. It wasn't done.
And Robert, he also talked about the shooter's ability to purchase these massive amounts of ammunition, talking about over 1,000 rounds, along with the rifle, of course, that he used to carry out this attack. What do you make of that sequence of events, the way the director is saying the shooter went about acquiring this ammunition, the weapon, etc., and the sheer amount of ammunition that he amassed before this?
Diane, not only that, where'd the funding come from as well? Those things aren't cheap when you buy them on the internet. And and one of the problems we have in this country is when the state puts out standards for these rifles, you can go over those standards by going on the internet and buying elongated magazines and different stocks. So he was planning this out in 8 months. This was a path of destruction he was on, and nobody saw this. I find it a little bit hard to believe. This is why we need the red flag laws, and they have to be pushed forward. But this type of thing, all these failures, it's a collective mess. And it's not only on Arredondo, although he's the main player here. It's all persons who were there that day of leadership not taking that door. They're in direct violation of that protocol, and that can't be glossed over. And I think one of the issues with the law thing, some of them got arrested here. In Parkland, they arrested one of the officers and charged him who did not go into the building. That may happen, and that may restrict Arredondo's statements to the press.
Aaron, I want to go back to the door and what Robert pointed out about the whole thing about the doors locking. So what we heard today was that the doors, and this part was confusing, so let me know if I get any of it wrong, because a lot of it you think, wait, what? Did I hear that right? So the exterior door that the shooter entered through, what we heard today was that the lock was working fine, but it wasn't actually set to be locked, and that there was another exterior door of the school that also was essentially set to be unlocked. And he also pointed out that the windows near the door don't have mesh, so that even if the door hadn't been unlocked, the shooter could have easily just broken a window, put his arm in, boom, and now the door is open. What do you make of that?
I think the whole point of what Colonel McGraw outlined with the door, to try to clarify some of that, was that the shooter had largely unfettered access to the school and to the classroom. The teacher that saw the gunman first, before he even entered the school, did in fact close the door, but the only way to know for sure that it would lock behind her would be to check it from the outside with a key. So the locks were working fine, but the door remained unlocked. And as you say, Diane, even if the door had locked, given how flimsy the window was, that could have easily been breached by the gunman. The internal door in the classroom cannot be locked from the inside, according to McGraw. So the only way the teacher could have locked her door would have been to go outside into the hallway and lock it with a key. That's obviously not tenable, and something that McGraw said that the committee should look at for potential legislation going forward.
Robert, does this make any sense to you, to have a door to a school and doors to the classroom that can only be locked from the outside, or at the very least that you can only check if they're locked from the outside?
It doesn't make any sense. It shows a pre-event failure of catastrophic issues here. The reason we say shelter in place is so you don't put a lot of children in the hallway where they could be hurt, where they could be shot. So you shelter in place, but you throw the lock so no one can come in. And there's a process afterwards to go through that school to make sure everybody's safe. So these things that you see, they're glaring, and it's hard to believe when I saw some of the things he was saying today.
All right, Aaron Katersky, Robert Boyce, thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.